Hello, good people, and welcome to the Higher Living Podcast. My friends, do we have a treat for you today? Today, we've got Dr. Ela Manga, who is the founder and chief troublemaking officer of Breathwork Africa in studio with us. I've been so excited to have Ela on our show. As many of you would know, I'm a big believer in alternative forms of healing. I'm a big believer in breathwork. I've been practicing it for many, many years. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that have been looking forward to having Ela on the show. So I'm not going to steal any more of Ela's thunder by trying to introduce her and trying to do justice of that introduction. I'm going to introduce you to the magnificent Ela Manga herself. Hello, Ela. How are you?
Hi, Sean. I'm very good. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm excited to be talking to you today.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. And like I say, I've been so excited about this. And I know that many people out there that I've talked to that listen to the show have also been very excited because, the concept of breath work and the concept of, I don't know if we can if we can call it, if this falls in the alternative healing space, but it's something that has been, I think that existed for a long time. But I find more and more people are practicing it nowadays. Do you find that?
Absolutely. And, even the term alternative medicine, I think it needs to be interrogated a little bit because what do we mean by alternative? When breath is the original life force, breath is the original medicine, how has it become alternative? Yeah. So I prefer the term integrative medicine. I believe that is the future of healthcare. And, I'm excited that I have gotten to understand and use this very powerful and underrated resource in a way that really supports people in healing and in transforming and growing.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Before we get into the detail of your organization and what you guys focus on, do you want to take us a bit through the Ela Manga story and tell us how did the story originate? I mean, you can go as far back as you feel comfortable going, but tell us a bit about who Ela Manga is and what makes Ela Manga the person that she is today.
Yeah, when I get asked that question, I always wonder how far back should I go? Where does the story start? Yeah. And I suppose it begins even before we're born, right? But I was born into a traditional Indian family, Gujarati family. We lived in a big extended home in Malabar in Port Elizabeth. And my dad passed away when I was 3. And as a result, I spent a lot of time with my grandfather, who is an amazing human being. And I just, was so influenced by his perspective on the world and his connection to nature and his spirituality. I suppose that his essence is very much part of me. And I suppose my choice to do medicine was also influenced by my family. I had 2 doctors in the family. And, it just was natural in those days, to either do medicine, law, or accounting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I got into medical school and, went through the whole system. And, when you're in that system, all you want to do is just kind of get through it. And you don't really apply your mind to bigger questions. Anyway, I did my internship in community service and was so exhausted, burnt out, depleted by the end of those 2 years, and I began my career burnt out. I can say that now looking back. And I had plans to specialize, but after those 2 years and being so sleep deprived and exhausted, I realized that there was no way I would manage that. And I was offered an opportunity to locum at a friend's GP practice, and I thought that would be a good option. And I really loved being a GP in those years because I could spend more time with my patients. It was a beautiful family practice, and, I really enjoyed working with young families at that time. But that didn't last long because I think about 2 or 3 years into that process, I realized that I was just practicing in quite a formulaic way. And my toolkit was quite limited. And I was getting to know my patients more. I was starting to understand the their dynamics, their family dynamics, and the connection between what they were experiencing emotionally and what they were showing up with physically. I started to see patterns emerging in supporting their health over time, and realized that actually I wasn't supporting sustainable wellness at all. That I was wanting to go deeper for myself, but also supporting clients to understand their health better and to feel more empowered in supporting their own health journey. And I really felt ill-equipped by my training. And then I had like a whole dark night of the soul, questioning what is all this about. And by that time I had ticked all the boxes. I had the successful GP practice, driving a big Audi A4, It was all great. I was living the formula, and yet so disillusioned, so burnt out again in a different way. And I questioned everything that I thought was successful. And it was then that I started to go through my whole process of undoing, I would say, unraveling, questioning the formula and discovering who I possibly was underneath all of those layers of identity. And, in that process, decided that I didn't want to be a GP anymore, that I wanted to study more. I wanted to equip myself with tools that really supported people to understand themselves and to grow and to transform. And I studied a modality called body talk, which is like so left field of energy medicine, and sold my practice and moved to a wellness center to practice with a good friend of mine who's a social worker at a family farm in Muldersdrift. Sure. And it was such an incredible time because I was learning so much, I was reading so much, I was experiencing so much, and I was supporting people in a whole new way. And we were then experimenting with putting people on 6-week and 12-week programs, people who were going through chemotherapy, people who were burnt out, and getting them to do body talk and counseling and massage and meditation and yoga in this beautiful natural setting. And realized that, wow, when we simply create the environment to support the natural healing process, then it happens naturally. There's not too much more that we need to do except to support the body's innate intelligence. And that was when I began to shape my unique kind of approach to healthcare, and developed my interest in energy management and burnout, because at the time I was dealing with people who, entrepreneurs and CEOs and people who are executive physicians and activists and journalists, and realizing that these people who were really upholding society, making a difference in the world, were more at risk for burnout than anyone else. And that really concerned me. And I wanted to get my head around what this burnout thing was all about. And then kind of wrote my book in that process. And then breathwork came along. That's another story because I was practicing integrative medicine. But, with integrative medicine in a country like ours, that is so under-resourced, it concerns me that not everybody has access to this holistic model of healthcare. And I was really curious around how to make this model of well-being more accessible to more people. And when I experienced breathwork, my first transformative breathwork session, this is not yoga breathing, this was like a different form of breathing that kind of expands your state of consciousness, or altered reality. I thought, wow, what is possible to bring this to more people as a simple, accessible, measurable tool to support their nervous system, And so we founded Breathwork Africa. That just kind of evolved. And here we are, this international organization. We're training practitioners around the world And we're just, following our hearts and going to where the need is.
Unbelievable. Well done. Well done. It sounds like an incredible journey. Do you sometimes look back? I mean, there's so many things I want to touch on, but the first one is, do you sometimes look back and think what the road might have been like if you stayed, if you pushed through and just remained a GP?
Yeah, I often think about that, and I look at my uncle, and now he's a GP in PE, and he's 75 years old, and he's, I suppose, just wired to be a GP. I wasn't wired that way, you know. I don't think I would have coped. I think that I would have had severe mental health issues. Um, I think that I would have found another path anyway, whether that would have been to leave medicine or to specialize. It was just not sustainable for me to be there, you know.
Yeah, and something you alluded to a bit later in your story was the model of medicine and the way that it's practiced at the moment, especially in this country, where trips to the GP tend to result in a script. And often people go to a GP just to get the script, and it's actually becoming more of a dispensary, and I use that word loosely, than it is being a place of healing.
Yeah.
Do you think there's some truth in that?
Absolutely. And doctors and patients are both part of a system, and it perpetuates each other. So, we go through a particular training that actually is so deeply archaic when we truly understand, when science is it has advanced so much in understanding how the human system works and how the autonomic nervous system works. It takes about 20 years for the medical curriculum to catch up to what science is discovering, right?
Yeah.
And so the medical training is still very much old paradigm, Cartesian model, siloed training that really doesn't kind of connect the dots. So doctors are like trained in the system. We're conditioned to think in this way. And then we go out and we see patients and we see them in this way. And this is what patients expect too. Patients expect to feel better today,
Yeah. It's exactly that. And also, it's a model that the pharmaceutical companies love because it's just a model that gets their business ticking nonstop.
Absolutely. It's the whole, okay, we make a diagnosis and we give a pill, and that pill actually suppresses the symptom, but does nothing to support healing. The innate process of healing. Everything is an anti-inflammatory antibiotic working against how the body is designed. And look, I'm not saying that there's no place for it. Of course, there's a place for an antibiotic when it's absolutely indicated. But to go to that as the first line is the problem. That should not be the first line.
It's true, and I can tell you from personal experience, in 2014, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. And this condition is quite a rare condition. It's called psoriatic arthritis. And it basically means that my joints get inflamed to a point where they're unusable, and that then spreads more and more and more. And in a state like that, where you don't necessarily have the time to explore the more natural options or the other options, that for me was a place where I tried many things naturally to try and resolve that issue. But it came down to the fact that it was only the medication that was able to resolve those symptoms.
Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. But at the same time, what can one put in place that really gives your body the best chance of assimilating that medication, and you are supporting emotional healing and your nervous system all at the same time? So you can take medication, but can we at the same time bring down inflammation that is caused by chronic stress? So there are measures that we can put in place that would minimize the need for medication, that would require lower dose, for example, just by putting those things in place. So
it's true. But there's also the element of accountability, and I speak from personal experience as well. It's nice to make the medication accountable for your condition.
Right.
So it's nice to say, I haven't taken my Inbro. Oh, my Inbro's not working so well today, but I've just been through a massive stress cycle. There's emotional issues that I'm going through, unresolved emotional issues. There's a whole battery of other things wrong, but then I blame the medicine,
Yeah.
And I think as consumers of medication, that is also the problem. It is the end user that also needs to drive the behavior of the practitioner.
Absolutely. That's such an important point, Sean. I think, that's spot on, because we hand over the responsibility to a pill, the practitioner, something outside of ourselves. And so this is a fundamental aspect of health and healing, is what can we take responsibility for? And it's not always easy. It's easier to take a pill,
Yeah, it is. And sometimes, I was having this chat to someone on the show last week. A lot of the times, what we are facing might not be something relevant to what we're dealing with at this point in time. And what I mean by that is there's this element of genetic memory. So passed down through the gene pool is not only the physical attributes that one has, but it's also the traumas, the experiences from the generations. Someone told me 4 generations back, I don't know how true that is, but 4 generations back, the stuff still filters through in the cell memory.
Absolutely.
So often you encounter an unexpected anxiety. You now have no idea where this is coming from. It's an issue that's related to your forefathers. And, and also in that space, I think the world is still coming to grips with the fact that this stuff is really real, that, it's not just this, and I say this again loosely, it's not just this Hindu thing that people talk about where it's like, all of your lives and your karmic past and all of that. It's got nothing to do with that. It's actually got to do with your genetics.
Absolutely. And that is one aspect of it, so you speaking to intergenerational trauma, which, has a huge impact. All right. And there are other layers of influence too. So, we also have collective trauma. So we are part of a system. We are part of our current reality, and we are influenced by what is happening on a collective level, collective anxiety, collective fear. That has an influence on us. So sometimes it's difficult to know, what's ours and what's not.
It's true.
It's ours if we are experiencing it. And if we're experiencing it, then how do we relate to it? And from what place within us are we relating to it? And that is essentially the point. What is the place from within us that we can relate to the waves of anxiety, overwhelm, burnout, whatever that is, and to know that, to invest in that, to cultivate that experience of ourselves is something that is really important for our times.
It's true. And it's also, you said invest in ourselves. Now, breathing techniques, and I've been through the Sudarshan Kriya course, and we'll get into how yours is different. And what it was I went through the week program on it because I was also battling with stress and that sort of stuff, and I found it very, very valuable. But the point I was coming back to about investment is it does mean you need to invest in yourself every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Every morning you need to invest in yourself, and then you get lazy. And then it's easier to pop a pill again. So if one really wants to deal with this intergenerational traumas and all of these other things, one needs to understand that consciousness is about being conscious of where you are, but also doing everything in your power to change your experience.
Absolutely. And we are wired for change. We are creative beings. So as much as the nervous system is wired for fight, flight, freeze, we are also wired for innovation and creativity.
Sure.
And that is the gift of being human. And how do we harness that ability, So, and change is a process. It doesn't happen overnight, or it doesn't just happen because we've decided we want to change. It takes work. And it takes work to spark up new neural pathways, but also to embed those new neural pathways. And eventually shift or upgrade the software program of our subconscious.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You mentioned something earlier, and it actually caught me by surprise because I haven't heard many people talk about this, and I have, done a lot of research on it myself, having suspected that I've also gone through something similar. You talked about dark night of the soul.
Mm.
How did you know that you were going through a dark night of the soul?
Well, well, that's a really good question. I was waking up feeling like my life had no purpose. I was confused. I was not enjoying work anymore. I was losing my zest, my natural zest and passion for life.
Mm.
I was in a state of fear and confusion. I needed to know answers. I wanted answers. I wanted to know what the future held. I was terrified of what next. If I let go of this, then what?
Mm.
You know, and I only kind of worked through that when I realized that when my discomfort became greater than my fear, is when I made the shift. But it was the period of about 2 or 3 years where I was battling between this discomfort of the current situation and the fear of the unknown.
Yeah. No, it's very difficult. It is, and one can go on to all of these websites and read around the 7 stages of a dark night of the soul and all of these things. But when you go through it, it's utterly humbling. And sometimes I don't know if you feel the same, but sometimes you actually wonder if you've actually made it out, if you actually have found the other side, and if you're not now back in the dark night, if I don't know if you can resonate with that at all.
I don't think we just have one dark night.
Yeah.
We have crossroads that we arrive in our life. This journey never ends. Just when we think, we've gone through something, we are on the other side of something, then life presents us with another choice, another choice point, which arrives in the form of a crisis often,
Yeah.
But when we have the tools and when we have like-minded community, when we can tell stories like this, then we have the courage to navigate through them. And so then that crisis, when we recognize it as such, can be such a profound opportunity to expand even more. So that first dark night, I suppose, is the most challenging. But then, when they arrive, it's like, okay, here comes a wave, but I know how to surf. So let me have fun with this.
Absolutely. And that is exactly what happens, is that you take out the seriousness of it.
Yeah.
Where prior, when you hit these waves, it would be the catastrophe. Oh no, here it comes.
Yeah.
Where now you observe that, just say the anxiety, to use an example, where the anxiety is merely a energy passing through.
Yeah.
It need not be feared.
Yeah.
There needs
Absolutely.
to, and the minute you surrender to that fear and not fear it and let it pass through the body, and let the body shed that anxiety and trauma of whatever it's doing, like you said earlier, the body knows best. Just let it do its thing.
Yeah.
But we want to get involved and say, oh my goodness, my leg shouldn't be shaking like this. I'm not feeling anxious now. My leg is shaking. Let me call the doctor. Let me get onto an antidepressant. I'm being melodramatic there, but
no, this is exactly it. No, this is exactly it. This is exactly what we do.
Yeah, it is. And now bringing it back into your area of breath work. So it was part of your dark night and part of the breath work that you do now somehow interlinked? Did the breath work sort of help you through the dark night?
No, because I didn't know breathwork by then.
Okay.
No, I only discovered breathwork like maybe 5 or 6 years after that.
Okay.
And now, in saying that, I was practicing breathing through yoga, but not in the way that I discovered it 5 or 6 years after that. That was a completely heart-opening, mind-blowing experience. So I had a relationship with breath, but I can't say it was in the same way that I used it. I've been using it subsequently.
Okay. Uh, and then how do you find that people can use breath work in a practical manner, just in their day-to-day lives to just get through the challenges that we face as a community?
Yeah. So, through this world of breath work, you'll discover that there are thousands of techniques out there. And if you Google breath work, you will leave feeling quite confused and overwhelmed, because there's one person that will tell you to breathe through your mouth and hyperventilate. There will be other people who will tell you to learn to hold your breath to build up CO tolerance. And then there's the whole realm of yoga breathing. I mean, it is so confusing. And it was really important for me to kind of simplify the world of breath work and to understand the science behind what we're doing and the impact on our nervous system and our physical system, and how we can use these techniques practically, and came up with a framework which I find really helpful. It's called the art of breathing, and the art is also an acronym for awareness, regulation, and transformation. So if you look at all the breathing practices out there, we can kind of loosely categorize them according to awareness, regulation, transformation. And I can take you through that very briefly, just to kind of give you more context. So breath awareness is essentially becoming aware of your breath, not trying to change it in any way, simply observing it. And this is the basis for any meditation or mindfulness practice, is simple breath watching. Okay. So that's breath awareness. Body scans would also be part of that. So simply watching. Then we have the whole field of regulation. So regulating your breathing. So changing the way that you inhale and exhale, and the breath holds in between. So you are consciously changing those 4 parameters of in the inhale, hold, exhale, hold in various ways and various ratios. And so under that category, we have techniques that can upregulate the system, can be very energizing. All right. So breath of fire, for example, would be an energizing practice. The Wim Hof practice is an energizing practice.
Yes.
Then we have relaxing or calming practices that activate the body's rest and digest mode through the vagus nerve. And those would be practices that prolong the exhalation, for example, the humming bee breath, okay, or the otherwise known as the Brahmi breath. People who do yoga might know this. So long exhalations, the 4-7-8 technique, which Andrew Weil uses for sleep, those would be relaxing practices. And then they're balancing practices that balance the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, or energy and relaxation response. So like alternate nostril breathing, box breathing, coherent breathing would fall under that category. And then we have breathing for transformation. And this is the technique I was alluding to earlier that was so life-changing for me. And that is a conscious connected breathing cycle, okay? It is connecting the inhale and exhale with no pauses, which kind of creates a transpersonal state and access to higher dimensions of consciousness where we can do some deep inner work. And that is usually held by a practitioner. So, yeah.
In Sudarshan Kriya, would that be similar to like the So-Hum technique?
So-Hum is probably more in the regulation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is quite a dynamic practice where it's a circular breath. Okay. And it's usually facilitated by a trained breathwork practitioner because it is so deeply cathartic. And so like holotropic breathwork would form part of this. It also it originates from a kriya, which is an ancient, one of the ancient kriyas that were kept quite under wraps until it was kind of brought to the Western world. Okay.
And commercialized.
Yeah.
Cheeky comment there. Cheeky. I had to throw that in.
Yeah. Well, that's another conversation.
Yeah, that's another conversation. Okay, that's very, very interesting. And I mean, what is good breath practice for the layman out there? So we've talked about being aware of the way you're breathing. If one is feeling overwhelmed or anxious or stressed or one of those hyper sort of sensations, And you mentioned don't interfere with it. Should you, if you're breathing at a fast pace, should you just let that be? Should you let the body do what it needs to do?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question. I think the first thing is awareness, just becoming aware of the breath. Right? And sometimes that way of breathing can be a way to release adrenalized energy. But as long as you feel like you are aware, when you're aware, then we have more agency. When we're aware, we have more control. So the difference between being aware of your breath versus this hyperventilation state kind of taking over can feel very scary and disempowering. So, I mean, you asked a good question. How should we be breathing? And I'd like to just mention a few points here. Please. On how should we be breathing every day when we are not aware of it? Because, most of the time we're not aware of our breath. But that unconscious breath should have a certain quality to it. And what is that quality? Because most of us are walking around with dysfunctional breathing habits, after COVID and sitting at our desks and wearing tight clothes. There's so many reasons why our breathing patterns have become dysfunctional. And one of those habits is breathing through the mouth. Okay, so we tend to go through life with our mouth hanging open and breathing through the mouth. And that's not a natural way of breathing. So most of the time we should be breathing through the nose. And even if we are not aware that we're breathing through the mouth, most of us do when we're sleeping at night. And this creates great disruption in our body chemistry. So nasal breathing is the first key to functional breathing. So we need to restore nasal breathing. And with mask wearing, it also exacerbated this, which is one of the reasons that, anxiety levels have gone through the roof, is simply because of these dysfunctional breathing habits. So when we breathe through the nose, we are harnessing the body's ability to filter, warm, humidify, slow the breath down. So it is not only supporting the air to be filtered, but also regulating the nervous system at the same time. Okay. The key of functional breathing is using the diaphragm. Now, most of us, when we are anxious and we're living in the sympathetic overdrive, adrenalized energy, as I call it, our breathing pattern reflects that. So we tend to breathe with our neck muscles and our shoulder muscles, and the diaphragm becomes weak in the process. So I teach everybody about their diaphragm, what it looks like, and how they should be using it and how to train it. Okay, and I can't emphasize enough that I believe that this is the most important muscle in the body, and most of us don't realize what it looks like, how it works. So using the diaphragm, retraining the diaphragm. And then when we breathe through the nose and the diaphragm, then naturally our respiratory rate, our resting respiratory rate will be lower.
So would that be sort of breathing and focusing on your stomach moving? Is that sort of what we want to try and do?
Yeah, and it's not so much the abdomen moving up and down. So that's one aspect of it. Okay. It's also the rib cage moving from side to side, and also kind of breathing into your back. So it's like a three-dimensional expansion.
Wow. Okay.
Of your torso. So you're breathing into your back. You're breathing. Your side ribs are expanding, and your belly rises all at the same time. It's that kind of quality of breathing.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting. Okay.
So that's what we call functional breathing. And that's what we use specific breathing practices to ultimately serve, is a breath intelligence, right? So we are training breath intelligence. And when we train breath intelligence, then we are essentially training resilience. And this is immeasurable. We can measure this through something called heart rate variability. And it's the adaptability of our nervous system. And there's so much research on this now.
Yeah. And that's the one thing. I mean, I mentioned to you earlier that I was watching one of your YouTube presentations earlier. And I must say, that's the one thing that I like about your approach, is that it is scientifically based. Whereas some of the other more spiritual approaches, if I could put it that way, and I'm talking about the kriyas and that sort of stuff, talks to the chakras and unblocking of the chakras. So, and it's a little bit hard for the everyday person to connect with that, whereas the scientific approach is really nice because it makes it quite nice and practical. Absolutely. In fact, I must tell you, you'll probably chuckle at this. we got to the part of the presentation where you actually were taking people through a breathing exercise. So I put on the loudspeaker here at the office, and my entire office was sitting there doing the breathwork exercise with our eyes closed. It was wonderful. I must say, it was wonderful. And the nice thing about it, what I enjoyed about it, I must tell you, is that it didn't take a massive amount of time out of our day.
Yeah.
It took a couple of minutes. We opened our eyes and everyone sort of agreed that we felt much more centered. And it literally took 4 or 5 minutes.
It's as simple as really.
Yeah, so it is a wonderful thing. And, I'm just looking at the clock now and I'm thinking I still have so much to talk to you about, like this adrenalized energy. My goodness, isn't adrenalized energy so powerful? Isn't it so addictive?
It is a drug. Adrenaline is a drug.
It is so hectic. And it's like when you get high on this, so you want more and more and more. And even if that more comes with suffering, it's fine because the suffering fuels the flow of the cortisol and the adrenaline.
That's right. And then eventually we get so locked into that state we can't break out of it. But the body can't cope with it anymore, and the poor adrenal glands just crash.
Yeah. And what does one do if you're in that state?
Yeah. So we have to kind of really train rest back into the system.
Really? Okay.
And, I speak about, body's intelligence, mind's intelligence, and heart's intelligence. And when we speak about body's intelligence, it's just about coming back to the basics, everything that we know, and restoring natural rhythms and cycles and reestablishing our circadian rhythm and eating the food that loves us back and learning to breathe and just creating the environment that will support the body's ability to replenish and restore.
Absolutely. It's exactly that. We live in our body's an ecosystem, and there's no quick fix. There's no, let me take 3 or 4 breaths now, but go and eat a McDonald's cheeseburger.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
There needs to be an integrated re-look at the way we live our lifestyles,
Yeah.
And we need to make lifestyle changes that result in a better state of mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It definitely is something that's quite interesting. Where do you see your organization going over the next 3 to 5 years, or even you don't have to tell me year-wise, but over the next few years, where do you see you guys going?
We're on a big mission to get breathwork into institutions, educational institutions, to make that part of the medical school curriculum, healthcare curriculum.
Oh, wow.
We're on a big mission to bring it into the education system. We've already started that process. And, we want to work at community level. We want to make breathwork accessible to every human being. And so we're training practitioners. We are getting high quality practitioners out there that understand the full spectrum of breathing, that understand the science to the metaphysical and everything in between and how it all connects. I think that there is so much research that is emerging around breathwork, and it's such a complex, beautiful science. When we study breathwork, we study all of life. I see breathwork becoming a whole profession on its own in, I would say, 5 to 6 years.
Wow. Okay. Wow, that's amazing. That is really, really amazing. And I think that, again, it's something that we take, like you said at the beginning, it's something we take for granted, but we do it every second of the day. And it's sometimes just finding those basics again that makes all the difference.
Yeah. And that's what I love about the science. When we understand the science, it opens a whole world of wonder to how magnificent the human form is. And it's just really empowering. And you feel inspired to practice this when you actually understand how it works.
And when you pitch this to the medical community, I mean, is there a buy-in to this type of thing as being incorporated as part of the training? And then is there a buy-in, or is there still this mindset of the old way?
Well, the thing is that we're working not with trying to change the old system, but creating a new one. I really believe, I believe in that. And those who resonate with it will find us, and they are. We're training so many doctors already.
Okay.
So that's what I'm more interested in is, getting on with it. And the people who resonate will find it. And eventually that will create the critical mass that gets the shift to happen.
Wonderful. Ela, the time has flown by as it always does on the show. Thank you so much for your time. It's been incredible. I mean, I could talk to you for another hour easily. And it has been an incredible, contribution that you've made on my show. So thank you so much. And we hope to have you on again soon.
Thank you so much, Sean.
And we wish you all the very best for yourself and your organization. And then I hope that all your dreams come true.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Sean.
Yeah,
Thanks for
thank you
having
so
me.
much. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Higher Living podcast signing off. It's on Wednesday today, not a Thursday. Just remember, if you do one thing only, and that's stay inspired. Cheers.